Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Chris is the founder and CEO of Cristo IT. Cristo IT has been providing Philadelphia-based businesses, IT, cloud, and cybersecurity services for over 25 years. Today's presentation will be focused on fortifying your business. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so if you could hold your questions until then, that would be great. Thank you for joining us, and over to you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction. Always greatly appreciate your due diligence on this and setting these things up for us. So welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Shalor, CEO of Cristo IT. Today, we're going to be talking about a written information security plan, or a WISP. This has become really front and center over the past couple of years, particularly in different industries. And typically it's being asked for either from external companies and stuff like that, but we're going to get into exactly what that means and what it can do for your business in forming a game plan together. As we said, I'm Chris Shalor, CEO of Cristo IT. We're your IT company. So we're your outsourced help desk, cybersecurity, cloud, and voice over IP services for small businesses in the Philadelphia area. So I always like to say we're the warm voice on the other side of the phone when you're banging on your keyboard and maybe having a bad day. Also the author of Sitting Duck, which is a guide for keeping yourself out of the trigger hairs of hackers and keeping yourself safe in small business land. So here's what we're going to be covering today. So really, what is a WISP? What is it? What do we need it for? What are the basics? So what are the basic fundamentals of what WISPs are? Obviously, everybody's going to have their own different flavor of this and what's involved, but we'll get into what the basics are and what they all have fundamentally. What goes into a WISP? What are the ingredients? What do you need to have? What is being looked for when you put one together? How to get started. We're going to absolutely get into the practicum as far as what do you need to put these things together? What's it going to take from your own internal resources as well as some of your third-party resources? What's the IT interaction with the WISP? Us being an IT company, we handle a lot of this interaction with our clients. And then finally, HR and WISPs. Some of you have your own internal HR forms or HR people, and some of you have external resources, and there's some interaction with your WISP as far as that is concerned as well. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is really just what this WISP is. So WISP kind of gives you an idea. We're going to use the analogy for purposes of this explanation of fire drill. We all went to school way back in the day, and we had fire drills. We needed to know where to go. So we had a plan. So this is typically on the back of everybody's door. This is something that was given to us by the teachers. Hey, when the alarm bell goes off, we're going to go down this corridor, we're going to go out this door, and we're going to meet out in the parking lot in this section, and we're all going to count off. Just understanding what the path was that we're going to have. We talked about communication. How are we going to communicate with each other? Because the alarm bells are going to be going off. There may be smoke. We may need to get down closer to the floor. There was again, setting that expectations about how we're going to communicate. When we get to the area, we're going to need to count off to make sure that we have all of us in the classroom together. Sometimes there's tools. Sometimes there's fire doors. Sometimes there's blankets. Sometimes there's lights and alarms and flashlights. And then obviously there was practicing. Those were always the best days at school. We got a chance to spend a couple minutes outside and hopefully in a sunny day, and they ran the practice, and it was something different than English or arithmetic or whatever the case may be. So these different items are what a WISP is comprised of. We need to know what to do. We need to have a plan. We need to know how we're going to communicate with each other. We need to practice this. And obviously there's some special tools, and we'll get into all of these different aspects of things. So when we look at what is a WISP, we're really looking at it's really understanding the four things of what most people are looking for when they ask you for a WISP. It's typically, most of the time, people are not waking up and getting out of bed and saying, hey, you know what, I need a written information security plan today. No, typically this comes up by some sort of risk analysis. We've made a determination that we don't know what we're doing, or maybe we've had a problem in the past and we need to handle things better. Or maybe an external resource, either a governing body or an insurance company or a vendor or a customer of yours is asking, hey, we need a copy of your written information security plan so that if we're handing you data, we need to know how you're protecting it. What is your plan to protect this data? And the four things that are really key ingredients to this, obviously, like I said, everybody's going to have their own different flavor of this. But the four key ingredients are, you need to have somebody in charge. So typically this person is named as a chief information security officer. That somebody's in charge, somebody is the one who is running this program. Obviously, there may be a lot of people involved with it, both externally and internally, but you need somebody at the top, somebody who is going to be directing the traffic. It needs to be versioned. It needs to be versioned and looked at least annually. So this has to be a living document. So this can't be a binder that you go through some process and you stick it up on a shelf, and then nobody ever looks at it ever again, and it just fades off into the distance, and nobody worries about it anymore. This has to be something that is continually versioned, continually, hopefully for the better. You're looking at best practices, things to improve upon this, and we recommend looking at this annually. In fact, a really good best practice would be whatever your insurance renewals are, either your umbrella insurance or your E&O insurance for your firm, that would be a good time to set on the calendar as well to take a look at your written information security plan and make sure that that's been updated at least once this year. Continuous improvement. We obviously want to get that best practices. So we want to make sure that as we're looking at this, we're doing something to get better each year. So we're looking at assigning some sort of action plan on this. Hey, you know what? Joe is going to be in charge of making sure that our employee education practices are getting better this year. And here's what Joe is going to do to get those things better. Have some sort of thing that we're going to get better and somebody who's assigned to it as a true action item. And then we want leadership to be involved. This can't be a skunk works, something that's off in the corner that nobody has any idea what's going on. This information needs to be part of leadership's review cycle. Leadership, because this written information security plan has to come from the top down. Leadership has to be involved. So when we're looking at this, there's a couple of key informations on this that we need to take a look. What goes into a WISP? Because there's a lot of different things that can be involved with this. Now, first and foremost, before you get too overwhelmed in all of this, you need to understand that this does not have to be a 500-page monstrosity. This could be as simple as a 5-10-page document that has some basic outlines of what everything is going, and it can evolve over time, obviously. But this does not have to be a gargantuan task. You do not have to be sitting there wondering how we're going to eat the elephant with the spoon. This can be something as simple as, we need to understand what our policies are. So first, what's the risk? What do we have? What are the access information? What are the administrative items that we have? And how do we define what the data is? Some of this might be very easy for your organization. It might be a little bit more challenging for an organization that has 10 different buckets of information. But you need to understand, first and foremost, what policies do we already have in place? When we hire somebody, do we have a policy set that we haven't put in front of them? And we'll get into that in a little bit in the future, in a couple slides from now. But some of this, you may already have some policies and procedures around how to use your electronic equipment. Do you have a business use case policy for employees to sign off on? So some of your onboarding documents that you have as part of your encouraging new employees to join your firm, that might be some of that you have to take a look at here. You have roles within the organization, not only roles for people, which we'll talk about, but also rules for your data, roles. So roles, meaning that not all data is the same. There's going to be some roles for your data that's just, your plain old Word documents and Excel documents. But if you have, for instance, if you're a CPA firm and you have tax return information and something with, criticalities of account numbers and tax return numbers and EINs or social security numbers, credit card information, all of that's going to be classified very differently than your inventory spreadsheet. So you want to make sure that the roles of the data within the organization are defined just the same as the roles in your organization for your job descriptions are defined as well. Do we know what those different types are? And where are they? Controls is where you get into more of the ones and zeros. This is probably more about IT and information technology. These are how are you informationally protecting that data? What are the, what antivirus do you use? What firewall do you use? What controls do you have in place to make sure that those data pieces are protected? And then finally, what if? You need to have the what if picture as far as, if this happens, do we know what to do next? If back to the school age, if there's a fire, do this. If the power goes out, do we have a plan for that? If the internet goes out, do we have a plan for this? Do we have the incidents, the most likely incidents? We did a session a little bit ago about your incident planning and knowing what types of incidents that you have or might be likely to have. You want to make sure that you have played that what if game and you know what the consequences are, to make sure that business continuity goes forward. So these are really the key pieces when you're putting your WISP together. These are really the sections that we're going to get into. And speaking of sections, this is a great way to get started. So when we look at this, we're looking truly at security policies. These are the things when you're going and gathering your information, when you're pulling the different pieces and the different levers and maybe having a conversation with your own team internally. And maybe you're having a conversation with yourself. There's no judgment there. I've had plenty of great conversations with myself, but when you're going and gathering this information, this is typically the source material that you're going to go for. So we talked about hiring a person. Do you have security policies already? Do you have non-competing information? Do you have non-disclosure information? Do you have policies around bring your own device? Do you have policies around mobile devices? Everybody's got one of these. Do you have a policy that gives a clear understanding as to what the responsibilities of the employee are when they have a mobile device in your organization? Some of these policies translate into how you're protecting that data. And you want to make sure that these policies are laid out in front of you so that some of them, if not all of them, are going to be included as part of your WISP. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, okay, how does this differ than our employee handbook? There may be a lot of crossover, particularly with this section here. So, and in your WISP, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. In your WISP, you would simply reference the fact that policy here is located over in your employee manual. Policy here is located over in, just to make sure that you have them all covered. You want to make sure that those are there, but maybe not all of them are. Some of them might be behind the scenes, may not be employee facing. Some of them may be security things that you have in place, background check information. Where do you store that information? Or integrations with your vendors. Those are things that you want to keep track of as well. Risk assessment. Some of you may already have gone through a risk assessment, and that might be what has brought you to this point. But a risk assessment, typically that's involving either the CFO or maybe your insurance company that's looking at where are the risks? Where are those probabilities going to happen? What are the incidents that we need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves against? Employee screening and training. So when we're going through this, how are we screening the people? How are we training the people? This is key, particularly with cybersecurity, and it's actually one of the most asked for items nowadays, is making sure that your employees are trained and are continuously educated on what's going on in cybersecurity and how they can keep themselves and the company safer. They want to make sure that they're continuously training those people because, unfortunately, human beings still represent a really large majority of where the problems stem from. So we need to make sure that we're educating our team, and we need to make sure that we have a policy around that. Whether or not that's a program where we're actually doing fake emails out on a monthly basis, or maybe we're training people on a quarterly basis. Maybe we're doing a lunch and learn series in-house, and we're having somebody come in as an external resource to teach our people how to be safer. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you document that out and you're keeping track of it. Sometimes people forget this, particularly as we've gone more and more cloud over the years, but physical security is absolutely still a thing. When somebody comes to your front door, when somebody accesses your offices, how are they being monitored? How are they being led personally through your organization? They're not just, you know what, go in the back room there and go find out whatever you need and report back to me. Are they being chaperoned? Is there a sign-in sheet at the front desk? Do you have a log of who's been in your organization and who hasn't, and how long that they were there? Vendor management. Vendor management. This is not necessarily who has access to the data, because hopefully that's a short list that you can kind of put together, but also all the vendors that might possibly be involved with the operations of your business. So this might be your payroll company. This might be your this company or that. It's your HR company. It might be the actual physical alarm company. You want to make sure that you have all of these vendors laid out so that you know who to call in case you have a problem. All your account numbers are documented. You're not fumbling or searching for them. You have the 800 number to call in case you need to get assistance from somebody. All of those things are documented as well. And then compliance management. This may or may not apply to your business depending on what you have, but there might be a set of governing documents that you need to adhere to. There might be some, if you're in HIPAA, if you're in FINRA, if you're more in the finance end, if you're doing SEC based and Sarbanes-Oxley is something that you need to adhere to. These governing bodies have a set of compliance documents that you want to make sure that you keep track of. Now we get into the nuts and bolts of it, and this is a little bit more in the IT realm of things, but these are more of the technical controls. These are when you're getting started, you need to kind of understand access controls. Who has access to what? And in small business land, there's no judgment here. We're safe on a webinar. In small business land, predominantly, we see a lot of, well, everybody just has access to everything because everybody wears so many hats. We're not sure on a day-to-day basis what they might or might not need to get access to. That may be okay in a smaller organization where, again, many people wear a lot of hats. Just be aware that as your organization grows and as you start to segment the organization out, you're going to need to segment your data and what people have access to. Your sales team does not need access to your finance data. Your marketing team does not need access to your HR information, your employee files. So there's absolutely some segmentation that needs to happen as you grow as an organization. If you're already there, fantastic. You need to start thinking about what are the different buckets of information and who should have access to that bucket. This is going to be a combination of both IT and HR, because as you segment this stuff out, HR is going to tell you who's in what bucket, and then IT is hopefully going to tell you what data is in what bucket as well. Network security, this is what you're thinking of when you're thinking of, what boxes are we checking? What firewall do we use? What antivirus do we use? Do we have EDR, XDR? Do we have a security incident and event management, SIM? Do we have, DNS protections and phishing protections? These are the items, the ones and zeros of what protects your data on a day-to-day basis. These are the tools. Endpoint security, this is when you get down to the actual workstations, what's on each individual workstation or endpoint in your organization to protect that front line. What's making sure that you're keeping your end users, your endpoints as close to the best and as deeply secured as possible. They're the ones that are encountering the world. They're the ones that are getting information from out in the internet and bringing it in-house to use and get your firms better. Data backup and recovery. This is, how do we get something back if we lost a spreadsheet, or if we forgot about a folder, or if something got accidentally deleted. How do we get that information back? We need to have that process in place. Security monitoring and event response. So this is when we see something happening. If Joe, all of a sudden, Joe comes to work for us every day, he lives here in Philadelphia, maybe he works in the Lansdale area or the Plymouth meeting area, and he's going to work and so forth and so on. All of a sudden, our system tells us that Joe is now in Barcelona. Okay, well, he was in New Jersey an hour ago. That's not physically possible. So when we monitor and we see an event like this, what response do we have? So when we have something that doesn't look right, what is going to be our response? So you should have those types of scenarios laid out when you play that what if game. This is going to be more on the IT end, and this could be a conversation that you have with your IT provider. When something happens that doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, if it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, chances are probably a duck. And then finally, security awareness and training. I mentioned some of the phishing testing, some of the quarterly testing. These can be put in place and can be automated so that you can keep track of who's getting trained, who's paying attention, who's answering the questions, who's actually not paying attention, who's backlogged on this, and who do we need to pester to make sure that they're kept up to speed as far as what the best practices are to keep yourself safe. I mentioned segmenting the data, and I want to revisit this just a little bit, because sometimes this is one of the challenging items, especially if you've been looking at this. Well, we've have a business and we're 5 years in, and everybody's just had access to everything, and I have maybe a folder, a Z folder and an S folder for the shared stuff, and our client folders are over here, but everybody just has access to everything. Okay. And that's fine. It's a great place to start. So first of all, you just want to kind of identify, are you the type of organization where you just have, on the left, you have your administrators, you have your managers, and you have your staff. Sometimes it's just a hierarchical structure. The staff need access to some things. The managers have access to a little bit more. The administrators have access to everything. That can be as simple as you get, and that could be your absolute first step. That's something that you would strive to, and that can absolutely be your first step moving forward. Maybe if you've grown a little bit more as an organization and you start to have departments, maybe you have an HR department or marketing department, finance, sales department, maybe you start thinking of your organization in terms of this layout, and you start thinking about what types of data do we have in finance. Obviously, some of the more critical high-end items that are Social Security, like I mentioned, and EIN numbers and all that other fun stuff. But sales might have some information. Maybe there's some information in there that we need to make sure that we keep track of. There's intellectual property information. HR might have the personnel records. Marketing might have some sales information or vendor information that they want to make sure that they're protecting as well. Those are all different questions that you want to be asking when you start segmenting that information out. So, all right. So what do I need to ask for? You probably are sitting there going, well, okay, well, what am I asking people for? And so when you go to request this information, you say, look, I need to know if we have an incident. I need to know, is there a form that we fill out or a form that you fill out if you're talking to an external IT person? Is there a form that you fill out that tells us, here's what happened, here's how we addressed it, and here's how we're recovering, and this is what we've learned, and this is how we're going to get better. You want to make sure that those are laid out in an incident response plan and form. It's fine if there's a problem. How did we address it, and how are we going to get better? What network security controls? These are the ones and zeros. Like, what firewall do we use? There's no shame in not knowing what's protecting your information, but the person who is taking care of this for you right now should be able to deliver all of this information for you. They might actually be delighted. I would be delighted if our clients came to us and said, I need to know what this information is. Great, let's put it together for you. Endpoint security controls. Do we have antivirus on all the machines? Is the antivirus up to date? Maybe it's a next generation antivirus. This is sometimes referred to as an EDR or an XDR, endpoint detection and response, which has a little bit of artificial intelligence mixed into it so that it's looking for patterns of information, not necessarily just plain old virus looking. Data backup and recovery. Do we know if I lost a spreadsheet, how long before I can get that spreadsheet back? And not only how long before I can get that spreadsheet back, but when they restore it, is it restored the last time that I had this backed up? Was it a week ago, a month ago? Maybe it's an hour ago, and on a good end. Security monitoring and incident response policies. So this is the, if something happens, let's play the what if game, what do we need to do? And then security awareness training are, if we have phishing testing, those are the different policies that, again, should be coming out of your IT information. HR and WISP. So you may have an internal HR person. You may have an external HR person. You may be the HR person. Lucky you. So these are the types of things that you are going to want to include from HR when you're putting this together. You're gonna say, okay, do we have an acceptable use policy for employees? When we hand them a company laptop, are we explaining to them what's appropriate for using on that particular computer? Because that's an extension of my business, your business, and do you know exactly how to use that computer? Mobile device policy. So most people nowadays are not using corporate cell phones anymore. They're letting employees bring their own device for cell phones. That's fine, but now you have your company's data on this, either in the form of maybe it's connected to your Office 365, you have your email on here, you have access to SharePoint online documents, whatever the case may be. That's all well and good, but you want to make sure that your employee understands that the company piece of the information that's on here has to be used in a certain way. Bring your own device. This has become more, it's not necessarily the norm, but it's absolutely become more used over the past couple of years, where people are bringing their own device and using them and attaching them to the corporate environment. Not necessarily something we recommend, but it's absolutely something there and something that you need to take a look at and have a policy for. Look, if you're going to be using your own computer to be able to use this information, we need to know that you're doing it in exactly the right way. I understand it's your computer, but it's our data and it's our company. Training. What are the training documents? What do we require from people to keep themselves up to date with cybersecurity and just general security? Not only with the computer, but hey, if you see somebody walking down the hallway and you don't know who they are you stopping and asking them, is there something, they're not being accompanied by anybody, they're not being chaperoned? how do I get you to where you need to be? You can't be just wandering around the office unescorted. Hiring procedures. When we hire somebody, we go through these steps. Are these steps documented? Do we know? Do we do a background check? Do we do a credit check? Do we do not only a background check? Do we do an annual background check? Maybe something's changed, or do we only do it when we're hiring somebody? And then finally, termination policies. When somebody leaves the organization, either voluntarily or involuntarily, there's also a set of procedures. How do we get the key back? How do we change the security codes on the front door? Do we get the credit card information? Have we canceled the card? Do they have access to any portals, external, internal? Do we want to make sure that that checklist is listed out so that we're turning off people who don't have the right to have access to that data anymore? Okay, well, we've gotten a lot here, and I wanted to thank you for kind of walking through this. A lot of people say, well, all right, well, how, what does it look like? When you finally have the 3-ring binder, and it may not be, actually I keep referring to a 3-ring binder. Nobody has 3-ring binders anymore, but an online 3-ring binder, when you have this, what's typically involved with this? And I wanted to lay out here, and again, these are going to be in the slides that we send out, but the 15 sections that we most see when we're putting one of these together for our clients, and we want to make sure that there's an overview. What's the purpose of the document? Data classification. This is what data goes in what buckets. Do we have social security information? Do we have credit card information? Do we have intellectual property? What are the types of things that we have, and what buckets do they go in? How do we know exactly where they are? Kind of inventorying your data. And then an asset inventory. What do we have? What are we protecting? Not just from a data perspective, but also from the different informations, the different pieces, the workstations, the servers. Maybe there's cloud information, that software as a service, portals that you log into. All of those things are things that you want to make sure that you have a full grasp of all of the different ways that you could possibly interact with your data. Access controls is whose hat are you wearing? So again, for the smaller organizations where I may have the HR hat on, and 5 minutes from now I have the CFO hat on, and another 10 minutes from now I'm going to have the sales hat on. You may be having a lot of different hats, but do you know which pieces and which hats have access to which pieces of data? You want to make sure you have those access controls in place. Business continuity and disaster recovery. This is your traditional backup. This is how do we go? This is the big go back button. If we have a problem for whatever reason, how do we go back in time? How do we get that information back if we have a problem? Network security. These are the ones and zeros. These are the, antivirus and firewall, and all of these different pieces of information that protect the network security. Monitoring is how we're looking at it. Who's looking at it? How often they're looking at it? What are they looking for? A lot of times, this is a great way to start. Is I mentioned Joe winding up in Barcelona all of a sudden. That would be something where there's a geographic alarm where it's not possible for him to travel 5,000 miles in an hour. That something's going on. We want to make sure that we're monitoring for the right things, and obviously, what are we doing if we do have something that pops up on those monitors? Physical security. This should be, if you take nothing, you absolutely need to make sure that you have this in place as soon as possible. This is when the bell at the front door happens, or when people are opening the office at the beginning of the day and closing the office at the end of the day. What's your checklist? Sometimes it's as simple as a little checklist near the front door. You make sure that all the lights are off. Maybe the 10-year-old coffee maker, you want to make sure that that's unplugged before the weekend, or whatever the case may be. You want to make sure that you have that physical security of your office checklist out, and it's proceduralized so that everybody does it exactly the same way. And Joe, who's coming in, maybe Joe just got hired last week, and Joe's a go-getter, and he's going to start staying a little bit later, and he's the last one to go. Does Joe know exactly how to put the office to bed at night before he walks out the door and locks it? make sure that you have that template, and that's absolutely a great place to start with this. Customer data privacy policy. So if people are handing you data as part of what you do, you're a CPA, you're a financial advisor, you're a lawyer. When they're handing you data, you have to have a policy that says this is how we're doing it, and it's customer facing. So you're telling your customers this is how we're doing things for you. It doesn't have to go into the ones and zeros, but on a policy basis, you need to tell them at a 10,000 foot level exactly how you're protecting the stuff that they're giving you. Vendor management. This is making sure that you have all of your people lined up. You know who to call. You have the Comcast information or the Verizon Fios information. Maybe you use Salesforce and you need your account number and the 800 number in case you have a problem with Salesforce, or your accounting package, or your Intuit license number for QuickBooks, or whatever it is. You want to make sure that those vendors are lined up and you know all of them. You've inventoried them. A really easy way to start this process is start with your checkbook. Where are you sending the money to, and make sure that you have a vendor associated with each piece of that, and then you can start the process there. The mobile device policy I mentioned, and then finally any appendices that you have. These are the actual inserts. Maybe you have a copy of this policy or copy of that policy. You want to make sure that those are included as well. This is my information. I very much appreciate the time today. This is my information. I don't know if any questions had come up for this. I'm happy to take any Q&As that may have come up. It's an honor to spend some time with you today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so feel free to leave any of your questions in the Q&A portion. Sometimes asking questions is much easier and quicker asking them verbally rather than typing, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. In the meantime, I have some questions, Chris. My first question is, what are some of the biggest problems that you encounter?
Believe it or not, the vendor management is probably, especially with companies that have grown a little bit over time, and maybe they're 10 or 20 or 30 people. What happens is different sections of the people start engaging with different vendors, and maybe not everything has been centralized as far as, who's paying for it, what the account is, what does it do, do we have any contact information for this vendor. Sometimes pulling that apart, like, hey, we use this marketing company, maybe it's even a third-party marketing company, but they're doing marketing for you. Well, I think they use some sort of email system to send information out. Well, it's sending out information from your firm. You have to go down that rabbit hole, and you have to go find, okay, how are they sending information out as us? I need to know what that mechanism is so that we can keep that on file. So believe it or not, what you would think would be just simply a Rolodex of who you're paying money to. Sometimes it involves a little bit of going down different paths within your organization and saying, where do the ones and zeros go? How do we send email? Do we use a third-party company or a portal information for this type of customer interaction? Do we know where that vendor information is? So that's probably been the biggest challenge for us. So we've been putting WISPs together for our clients for about the past 2 years now, and that's probably been our biggest challenge, is kicking over those rocks and saying, well, did we find out where that piece of information goes? And sometimes it's finding out from Joe because it's Joe's little thing. And okay, Joe, when you do that, what vendor are you using? Do we have an email address, a website, a contact information? Do we have do we have their security policy from their website to tell us when we give them information, how are they protecting it? We want to make sure we keep track of that as well. A little bit long-winded answer to your question, but that's it's probably the bigger the company, the more the vendors start to grow with you, and it becomes more and more complex to get all of that information together.
Got it. I appreciate it. My other question was, can your IT company be the one in charge?
No. So a lot of times we get asked this, and we are intrinsically involved. We are absolutely sitting at the table with you for our clients, but it has to be somebody in your own organization that's in charge. It's your company's data and it's your sign off on it. So somebody in your organization has to be the person in charge. We can absolutely be like 95% of the pie and help you put that information together. But at the end of the day, the buck stops here kind of aspect of things.